This is I had a to-do list because Paul was asking about first Descendant, and yes, actually I've been following that. And one of the things I was like, I need to do is actually apply for the content creator program. So that's what I did during the break. I was like, oh, it's been on my to-do list. So that the beta for that starts on October the 20th, and it's a looter shooter. Like generally speaking, I'm kind of just always now hesitant about any looter shooter because it's not going to be about how it launches. It's going to be how do they make more content for it down the road. What is the game going to be over the long run? How's the gameplay feel? And the only way to know that how it's going to feel is to play it. So I will check it out if I get access to it, but I don't until if I don't get access to it, I'm going to wait to see what other people who do have access to it say before I even consider bothering with it.
Access also doesn't tell us the final question because
right.
Are we is it is free to play. And so like you and I played Diablo Immortal when it had its early alpha at BlizzCon and it felt great. And
no. Maybe to you. I was complaining about the whole time.
But like I thought it felt fine for what it like for it being it's supposed to be something that can run on a phone and is Diablo. I was like, fine, fair enough. And Skilla got to play the beta of it because they beta a lot of things get betaed in the Australian market. And he said in his review before it released, I was really impressed with this experience. What I did not see in early access is how it will be monetized. So if you were telling me this game is not monetized at all, I am telling you this seems like a great game worth trying out and seeing if it's a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's a huge unknown in the free-to-play space of how do they get it paid for, right? Traditional pay models, you don't have to worry about that. You're like, yeah, and it'll get a price tag, and then you see the price tag, and you immediately understand it. You're like, oh, they're going to take this much money from it, and then I'm going to get the game. Done. Complete. But with free-to-play games, there is a question of like, no matter how good that game is with early access, how do they monetize it?
Yeah. Monetization is going to be always that question. The gameplay, though, I think is the first real question, because if you don't have good gameplay, then I don't care how you monetize because I'm not going to stick around, right? So that's where like when Diablo added the controller support, I was like, okay, this is they were addressing the issues that I had when I played it, because I was like, all right, I'm not going to sit here and play this on my phone. I'm not going to play it on my tablet. But with Diablo Immortal, I was like, it's good that there is a Diablo on the mobile space. You know, it's good that exists.
As a
concept, because I was like, they're it's the same reason why I was happy they brought Mario to the mobile space. It's like,
absolutely,
you're advocating all of this. Like, people aren't going out and running out and buying Nintendos. They're playing on their phone and their tablet. And so you're missing a new generation of nostalgia that you're going to just, in 30 or 40 years, it's going to end up costing you everything, because no one's going to ever heard of Mario, or no one's going to ever know of Diablo, in that regards from a game, historical perspective. You'll be like, oh, that's that old game that old people play, as opposed to like, we all play Rayman. It's like, all right, well, yeah, Rayman showed up to the tablet or whatever, it's like, you're surrendering ground.
Your brother doesn't get to play many games, but when he does, he's set aside the money that he typically wants to have a relatively premium experience. So he's willing to spend the money on whichever console he needs to buy. He's willing to buy whichever game and whichever version of that game he needs to buy. He's willing to subscribe to something like Game Pass if that's what it takes to have this great experience. But he's only considering games he's heard of, and he doesn't watch things like Gamescom. And so the way he hears about things is either through you, which means he hears about every Square Enix title, or through other forms of marketing. And he does sometimes get to play games on his phone. And so like, if he's like a huge Elder Scrolls fan, so if Elder Scrolls could come out with a mobile game that he enjoyed, that would keep Elder Scrolls top of mind, so that when he says, hey, I only have time to really play 1 or 2 games this year, which one do I buy? That's what converts him. So I do think it's important that franchises are present in the mobile space. That doesn't mean move to the mobile space. That means add by going additionally to the mobile space.
Yeah.
Now execution is where everything hits the road. So like Diablo Immortal, all of my issues with it are execution based, not the concept that the IP wants to work with somebody who's in the mobile space to make a mobile game out of their IP while also developing a mainline game. Like there's nothing wrong with it, while also supporting past mainline games. Like Diablo 2's continued to get great support. So like I didn't have a problem with the concept of Diablo Immortal existing. it's hard to talk about that without also acknowledging how they then chose to actually do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we look at First Descendant, this is the first I'd heard of it. I didn't get to watch Gamescom this year.
Yeah,
Third person cooperative looter shooter. It, in the same grouping as games like, I don't know, they compare it to Destiny 2 because that's the recognizable title.
That's
But I think
that's the risk.
I think it looks very like Outrider-y.
Mhm.
I think it looks because it's free to play. I would ask like, okay, well, how is Warframe monetized?
Mhm.
Right? Or what I would be asking as a layperson that maybe didn't like, okay, are there other free to play looter shooters that are well supported, long running? I think Warframe is something that's very unique in the space that manages to run with basically community support. So, yeah, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I'm hoping that I can get
Steam
into the
beta.
beta. I'm hoping I can get into the beta and I can participate in it and give you guys my thoughts, like actually having gone hands on. Again, monetization doesn't bother me because I'm not going to spend money on a game that I don't like, and so it's like when people are like, oh, it's free to play, and let's say it's just horribly monetized, like it's just awful. It's like, well, the game sucks. So I'm like, all right, like that's the story, moving on. But if it's a really great game, lots of fun, and then you start having questionable monetization structures, then the matter is like, are you an adult and do you know how to avoid those monetization? Because it's a hard line, because one of the things that I see often is that even if it's a game, because I'll see gamers say this, like, oh, you can farm the premium currency, like they let you farm the premium currency, and like for me that doesn't bother me. But what that does do is it puts everybody in the back has a calculator in their brain that says, I could go deliver pizzas for, I don't know, $10 an hour or whatever the going rate is for delivering pizzas is. Oh, but I could go farm this $2 thing up in 17 hours. Like all of a sudden you have an immediate conversion of your time and the value of your time. And so you will feel like the game is saying, spend money and don't grind this out. Where in a non free to play scenario, you wouldn't actually feel that. You'd be like, oh, it just takes 17 hours to grind this out. That's actually pretty cool. I like grinding games. But all of a sudden when it's like, I could go do a job and have this knocked out in 30 minutes, have the cost of this knocked out in 30 minutes, or 17 hours of sitting here playing, how dare they? And so that's where I always like when they have that. I'm glad they have it, but no matter what, someone's going to always do the math and feel like their time's not being respected.
Reasonable initial launch, reasonable amounts of continued support and balance and updates is step one. That's what like Anthem didn't have. You don't have to start with it. No Man's Sky didn't start with it. They built it in later. They've done incredible things. It's a totally different game. Step two, now that you've let me in for a reasonable initial cost, that doesn't have to be free. A reasonable initial cost for a reasonable amount of content. What am I getting, right? Final Fantasy 16 probably won't be free to play, but I will get a big chunk of content for whatever they consider a reasonable chunk of money. Then after that, if it's going to be a live service game, which does seem like this would be, after that, then you need to say, okay, now what am I getting for what amount of money?
Yeah.
Final Fantasy says you're going to get a patch every 4 months and a half patch in between, and you're going to be paying $12 to $15 a month. Okay.
Yeah.
Like that's the math. And then that allows me to sit down and say, is that a good fit for me? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe the answer is no, because our individual definition of reasonable are all going to vary. But at least they've put all their cards on the table and let us process. And like none of that's here. So
it's like $60 a patch.
It's exciting.
If you're active, it's like $60 a patch. Unless you're a legacy, and then it's like $40 a patch. And that's the cost. Like you don't really kind of think about it, but you're like, oh, and then the thing is, it's interesting is that you're paying that if you take a break and come back, which is what's encouraged, then, it's obviously less per patch. Because if you started today, you just start with all the content, all the patch that's been made. So
I save the $2 per month by booking 180 at a time, and then I put 2 retainers on, so I am back up $4. So right, because they're $2 a piece.
Yeah. So
I added to my subscription with 2 additional retainers. So that's where I'm at. But yeah, it's cool. I hadn't heard of it. So when you asked the question, I hadn't heard of it. But the Steam beta, October 20th, 26th, that's step one. And then after that, we'll just have to see how it's supported and how it's monetized.
Yeah, honestly, with everything coming out this fall with Ragnarok, like It's, like, yeah, do the beta, get the feedback, and then launch like in January when, when you're not going up against like WoW and, established franchises. But who knows? Maybe we'll see. But no, it's gonna be interesting. I'll be checking it out if I can get access to it, for
Square
sure.
Enix has a game coming out like every 10 days for the next 2 years. Like it's ridiculous when they show their lineup. That's the other way to do it. Is just be a publisher who's like, yeah, we have a game every Tuesday forever.
Yeah,
Like I don't know how many games they legitimately are working on right now. It felt like so many. It feels like if you tried to list them all, you'd forget like 5 that people would be like, how'd you forget those? I don't know. I only named 40. Like it's so many.
All right, we want to talk relics?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're just going to transition to this naturally. Guys, with patch 6.25, the first phase of the relic system for Endwalker will be rolling out that's connected with Hildebrand as just a concept. And this has gotten, positive and negative reactions from the community, which that's usually about to be expected especially when it comes down to this. We've seen people have negative reactions to Eureka and Bajia. Now here we are going back to a more quest-centric method. Chris has been playing through the Hildebrand questline series. How far have you gotten on that questline?
Caught up.
You're all caught up, so you're ready to go.
Ready to go
on the theoretical 18th that we'll probably find out this Friday.
Yeah, we'll find out Friday. We're filming this on Wednesday the 5th. We'll find out this Friday. Confirmation, we believe it is October 18th.
All right. Hopefully you guys want to join us for that. If you're watching this as a video highlight clip, etc., be sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss these live shows and these videos. On that note, though, so when it comes down to your expectations, like you and I, like the first relic we've ever finished was the Shadowbringers one. Like that was my... Like I was actually really impressed by the system and how the content all flowed together. And so I ended up finishing a relic and I was like, that was impressive. I've always started the relics in the past, never ever finished them. That was my my first relic to finish in Shadowbringers. But what are your feelings? What are your thoughts going into? What are your predictions for the new relic system?
I mean, so the reason we can talk about predictions now, and even though they're about to tell us, is that I don't think anything they tell us Friday, I don't think the 6.25 is the defining moment. I don't think step 1 defines the relics. You and I always do step 1. We always enjoy step 1. Step 1's like, give me 6 poetics. Like it's nothing. It's
just drop them off in that basket.
It's fine. Here, I'll give you the weapon now. You drop the poetics in on the way out.
Yeah.
If you remember, like it's not, they're so easy. It's usually a little quest series, kind of get you introduced. It's going to be picking up off of Hildebrand. For anybody that hasn't done Hildebrand, the last relic did require you did a raid series, but I think for a lot of people who don't do Savage and like battle content, so relics are a good fit for them. Or even people who do Savage, people who like casual battle content in the game, they're already doing Alliance raid series. So if you make an Alliance raid required, they've either already done it or they're like, oh yeah, I should do that. And so like, that's not a big deal. You can also do those in a single sitting. Hildebrand is a very specific type of humor that they originally added to the game as a test in the rigging of the people's facial expressions. And then it got such a positive feedback that people said, hey, you should add this to the game. And they added it as side content. And I think there were people who said, why is this even in the game? So then in Shadowbringers, they actually didn't really add support to it. He was in a dungeon as a reference, as a callback, but that's it. There was no quest. And then there was enough people that missed it that they wanted to bring it back in Endwalker. So it's kind of always danced around as this optional side content that's some people's jam and some people's not. But now it's required, and there's a lot of it. If you are going to pay attention, I bet the ARR section probably takes you somewhere in the ballpark, plus or minus 6 hours. And I bet everything from Heavensward to Current takes you another 6 hours. But if you're story skipping all that, it's probably only like an hour because it's mostly cutscenes. Plus, you're going to get like 3 trials. You could go do those unsynced. If you're somebody who likes battle content, don't do them synced. Find a group to go do that because it's really that's a fun chance to discover trials you've never done. What a fun thing to get to go do blind trials that you've never done as like a free little mini patch for you. So I've done all that. That's now required. I don't think step 1 is really the important part. I think they're going to tell us some stuff about Beladia, the mother of Ul'dah. Ul'dah had a sister city, Sildine. And any of you that are interested in Criterion Dungeons on 6.25, which we talked about Monday, the Sildine Subterrane is the name of the first Criterion Dungeon. And so I think that's why this is all important. So I do think the narrative will be important, but I don't think that 6.25 is going to be anything substantial as far as the actual relic grind itself.
Yeah, I do wonder if they'll see any kind of connection into at least the variant version of it, right? Where you need to go and run this a couple times and get, whatever they decide to turn in. Because one of the things that I was like, I did do that was also fun, is especially as the part of the first step being in Shadowbringers was all poetics driven. I went and got every poetic version of the starting relic for all the jobs. I was like, okay, yeah, cool. Like
Sure.
I got time. That was also when there was a big massive delay with the COVID and everybody was like, all right, we got to pause everything. But I was like, oh, this is a step that's in there right now. So I'm farming up poetics anyway. Let's just get every weapon just for the sake of getting every weapon. And so that ended up working out, I think, fairly well. So I wonder if they'll have a similar step in that regards. But I have to tell you, like, I don't feel the need or the pull or the interest to jump into it, and so I'm really kind of curious to see what other people say about it, to see if it's like, oh, Brian, you'll really like this. There's a good reference to 1.0, or there's a really funny line right here. And so I'm honestly, for me, I'm not planning on touching the relic at all, like not even step one. I just don't have any interest in it, to see and wait to see like what you say and what the community says, to see if it's like, oh yeah, this is something definitely worth your time. Because it's like, I don't know, like I did one relic, and being that I know that it's glamour and I'm not even glamoring the relic that I got, I'm like, all right, like it's not really an issue for me. What do you think?
I would love for it to have some special interaction with Criterion.
Mm,
I would
that'd be
love for
cool.
it to have something unique about that experience.
Yeah.
Even if it's not powerful enough to really matter, an additional variant option, or
Hmm.
I would love for it to do something special.
That'd be cool.
The first one that really did something like that caught my eye. I don't really know I don't know every step of every one. I've done Heavensward all the way through the Relic, and I've done Shadowbringers all the way through. I haven't finished any of the others. But in Stormblood, at the very end, they drop Baldesian Arsenal, and any of us who fell off the Eureka train, especially back in those early steps before they nerfed them, a lot of us fell off the
Mm.
train, and the train just rode off into the distance without us. I I spent probably 30 hours watching Miztech Prague BA, like of my time watching her stream, because I was like, this is so awesome. But I just couldn't bring myself to do the grind to catch up. And I still haven't done it. And so, like, if there is something special at the end of this, I hope it's Criterion based. I hope it's some special final chapter to the variant dungeons, or something like that. But we don't know. There could be
Right.
nothing. It could be, and then there's been questions of, will it be the joke weapons? Will it not? Maybe the final step is that you unlock the joke weapon in addition to having all the other weapons, or something like that. So I can run around with a giant frying pan. The problem is, once they add that, just know that all of your cutscenes have been ruined for 7.0. Because you're going to get into a dungeon with me, and I'm going to be in a pig suit with a frying pan. Like, that's going to happen. The only thing better than a hammer would be a frying pan. So like, that'll happen. So I kind of have mixed feelings about that. 6.35 on is really where I wanted to talk about today,
Okay, go ahead.
because 6.25 probably isn't much.
And
That's
so,
my guess. And
and
like you
targeting
said,
six three
you'll just
five.
pass it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's just skip over the thing that Brian's skipping. 6.35 is step 2.
Yeah, and that would be roughly around, we would expect, February or early March. Chris can pull up his sheet for his expectation. We believe,
Yeah,
go ahead.
March.
Yeah, so it's like we believe that 6.3 will be January 10th, and then March for 6.35, which is where time wise, this is where we're talking about for the next relic step. And this usually ends up being kind of a bigger, meatier step, a little bit longer of a grind. So what are your expectations or hopes to see in this regard?
So here comes the question. So in the past, they've had us do fates. They've had us do exploratory zones. I don't think we're getting exploratory zone this time. If they are, they're probably revealing that Friday. So people see this and like, haha, you're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Oh!
so I don't think we're getting exploratory zone. So my question is, what are they having us grind? Because there is always that kind of grind component.
Mhm.
First of all, I think they put the biggest bicolor gemstone grind we've ever had, the biggest fate grind we've ever had as an option, was put in this expansion with the mount that wants you to run, you or some combination of people, if you're buying them, to run like 6 billion dungeon fates per mount, to kind of put those out in circulation. It's not like the greatest mount skin in my opinion, but it is going to be really rare because they're just, it's a lot of fates. It's like 3,000 or 5,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
I would love to see it tie to some fates at some point in either 6.35 or 6.45 because it lets you double dip on those fates. And I think they've really emphasized fates. And then once you've emphasized fates, ideally that moves us closer to, I would love in 7.0 for fates to take their next iteration and start bringing in the Bozja Zadnor style leveling fates up and having maybe after your kind of chi type moments or Ixion type moments, there is a duel, and having these bosses come out in the open world and things like that. And so it's a lot. Just saying 5319 fates for the mount or the wings, 10,638 wing fates for both. It's a lot. So I would love to see it tie to fates. It would also be neat if it tied to fates, if it tied across multiple expansions, so that maybe people could go double dip and do multiple relics at the same time. Because to do the older ones, like the ARR ones, you think you have to have that weapon equipped, but in Shadowbringers you didn't. And so if they would let you kind of double dip and do more than one relic at once, I would be interested in seeing that, since it does kind of encourage that legacy. But I do think at least one of the steps is going to require you to grind Criterion. I just don't see why they tied these together unless they're going to say,
what about the
go
deep dungeon,
run
though?
10 variants.
What about the deep dungeon? Because deep dungeon could also be, tied into, like Belladine, like within the subterrane, right? Imagine the variant dungeons unlocking. Oh, now here's a deep dungeon, and then we know that 6.4 and 6.5 would be where we see more of the variant Criterion system brought back in.
So the reason I think that's going to bother people is that if Deep Dungeon ties to Relic, I don't know if we still get Deep Dungeon weapon skins.
Okay.
And the thing about Deep Dungeon is because when you zone into a Deep Dungeon, your weapon changes to the Deep Dungeon weapon skin, whether you wanted it to or not. What's really neat about those is I'm pretty sure that means that Deep Dungeons are obligated to support all future jobs. So when a new job gets added to the game, they don't get that many weapon skins right out of the gate. That's something that builds with time. And Deep Dungeons are one of those things that gives them options. Am I wrong?
Beats me.
Chat can
fill me in. Yeah.
So correction incoming. So I think that would be my first concern there is, will that take away something from Deep Dungeon? That is an interesting idea to do that. I do hope it's multiple options. So yes. I hope there's a Criterion version versus a Fate version. I don't really care if one's more efficient than the other. If you are going to make one more efficient, I thought it was really odd last time that Fates felt more efficient than the on-patch stuff.
Yes.
It feels like Criterion being the marquee feature should be the faster option, because it felt like, oh, I like Bozja, but I want my relic. So I'm going to go run Fates instead because it's more optimal.
Yeah.
It felt weird that I was being encouraged to leave the content that I wanted to be in.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Hey, if you don't want to be in this, we have another option. But if you're willing to give this a try, it really is the more efficient method.
Yeah, and with no big zone, like I think if they kind of tie it into the different content, that would be something that would invite me into the system, because I love filling up multiple bars at the same time. So if it ended up becoming where it's like, oh, you're going to be doing the content that you're already doing, Brian, like, why not go check this box so that you're also making progress in this other area? Like that to me sounds great. Also, where like any kind of thing that is like, added to it. So like, imagine if they added some kind of just bonus. It doesn't have to be, and I would never advocate for it to be the most efficient, but you always have the roulette system that allows, like, yeah, you can get a daily, 1/100th of a progress towards this. Okay, cool. Like, it's not your efficient option, but if you only have like, I only got 20 minutes today, let me just pop this in and be able to make a little prog. There we go. I think that would be something I think that'd be really cool to see. Go ahead.
I think open world also ages better. I mean, Eureka and Bozja have aged surprisingly well. But open world is something where, like, you get a group of blue mages together, you can do it at any time. So with data center visit and all of that, I just like open world. I like the idea that you're off seeing people. I like, in my opinion, I think it's really neat that people would go do anything in the open world, old tribal quest, anything in the open world, because I like the idea that somebody's coming through as a new player in this MMO that they're paying a monthly subscription for as a largely solo experience.
And they see all kinds of people doing all this stuff.
And a hunt train blows by or a relic train blows by. I love the idea that they see all these mounts and these crazy glamours and that people are there.
These skills that are like, oh, wow, it just ends up being this spectacle.
think it's really great.
Yeah.
So I would love to see it have an open world version. It also lets Blue Mage come out to play. Blue Mage saying it's limited makes it sound like it's antisocial. I think Blue Mage, if people who don't like Blue Mage, I think the most fun to do, the more people that are around when you're Blue Maging, the better. If you have done an alliance raid as Blue Mage, if you have done Fate farms for an hour or more with Blue Mages present in your group, or you were the Blue Mage, that's where Blue Mage, in my opinion, really shines. The Carnival's neat. There's a lot of cool stuff tied to it. But that's like saying, oh, I like the Dark Knight questline, but really like where I think Dark Knight is really fun is when I'm in dungeons. Like I play this game to play with other people, and I think Blue Mage is at its best when it's getting to come out and help people progress. And open world fates are one of those things. If they let us go do Shadowbringers Fates progress for this, you're going to see a lot of people go back to finish up their Shadowbringer zones, and there's going to be Blue Mages in it when they up that Blue Mage limit, and it's going to blow things down.
Yeah, I would love to see that as well, because like the fact that we got bicolored gemstones in Shadowbringers and in Endwalker, it makes me always kind of still wish that we'd see them bring that system backwards into the other faded zones, because then imagine if you were like, yeah, I haven't really finished off this, this expansion's fade or done that. I can take part. I have player choice. Open world content is by far what really kind of helps define and what I get a lot of enjoyment out of, because also I like the variability. There's no guarantee that you're running with a fate train in which that there's like 10 other or 500 other, like it doesn't matter, right? You could be, oh man, this is just me and my chocobo. How do we function? How do we do this? And then all of a sudden other people start running up and you're like, yes, now we're going to get this win because this was taking so long, and hopefully encourage those different things as well. So that all sounds like a big win. And then essentially, like you said, if they have the premier content progress driven into the variant, I would probably see variant as the big driver, because Criterion starts stepping it up in difficulty, and like that just seems like all of a sudden, and like maybe Criterion is more efficient, in that regard. So we're like, hey, you
get the clear, like Savage is double, but it's 5 times the work. You're like,
well, but still, like if you want that challenge, if you want that challenge, or maybe you get it down to where you got it down, you're just like, let's roll, But I think that would be where what invites me into the relic system this round, is that if all of a sudden it's like, hey, the content that you're enjoying is also rewarding this other thing that you can just kind of work on passively and not actively. Like that's what gets me. That's what actually says, okay, I'm gonna go do that quest line. But if it opens up, which is like, hey, go turn in some poetics, etc. Like I'm just not yet there. And maybe it's because I got 8 levels to go on my Omni 90, and I'm just like, all right, well, I'm gonna hit 90, finish Bard off, finish the controller guides, and then hopefully spend my life in the Criterion system. But other than that, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Like unless there's that extra checkbox.
So that's what I want. Is I want to grind. I want multiple options. I think this will all start in 6.35. We'll continue to 6.45 and 6.55. I want the 6.55 section to reveal something special. I don't care what it is, something special. And along the way, I want them to tie us into the marquee featured content. Give me a reason to go interact with Island Sanctuary. Give me a reason to interact with Criterion Dungeons. Give me a reason to interact with Deep Dungeon. Some combination thereof, and then give me an option for any of the ones that aren't my thing to go run old raids or go run old fates, or something that breeds me back into older content, just because it's a really fun excuse for that. And then one of the things I don't like as a final piece of the relic grind is I don't like that it's the same amount of work for every relic in order. I think because people want it to be a grindy earned thing, in my opinion, your first relic should be your most expensive, and then it should step down. There's an argument to go the other way, or to get people into the system, your first should be the easiest, and then it could get harder, and then you could have like achievements or something special for getting them all. But either way, if it's going to take 100 hours to cap every single relic, I don't want it to be 10 increments of 10 or whatever I don't know how many jobs there are, 17 something, but I don't want it to be that even spacing. I want them to be staggered. I'd prefer it to ramp down so that you're accelerating, so that it's like, I got my warrior one because I love warrior, and then I got the other tanks because I like the other tanks. And then I wasn't really going to play Machinist much this expansion, but it's easier, and so it encourages me kind of down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Because with older relics, like I enjoyed the Heavensward relic, but I don't want to do the exact same amount of work for a second one, and so I would find it intriguing if they kind of nerfed it as it went. That's my opinion on that.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah, I got kids knocking at the door, so I guess that means it's it's time.
End of the morning show.
End of the morning show.
We'll see Friday. Believe it or not, Brian, Friday it's lore week. We're doing lore stuff twice a month on Twitch. I'm doing all my first time as a story skipper. I will have Omni 50 on my story characters. I will not only have Omni 90 on my main. I am coming up on Battle Omni 50 for my story alt. So I am leveling a lot. So
that's awesome. As the kids are banging on the door, Dad, we want popsicles. We want popsicles. Guys, I put in chat the link for Twitch if you're not following over there. I hear you on that popsicle, bud. It's too early. It's still morning. We don't do popsicles in the morning. You
popsicle o'clock somewhere.
Popsicle o'clock somewhere, guys. Anyway, hopefully go hang out with Chris and enjoy your day over there. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up as the chanting goes louder.
The morning popsicles are made out of spinach and kale.
Oh, dude, yes, get that spinach and kale. All right, guys, that's going to wrap it up for us in this regard. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being here for part of our morning show. We'll be back with you guys Friday. Lots of content. Friday's going to be a crazy busy day. Hopefully you want to join us for the live show and for the live letter and so much more. They're just killing me. They're breaking my flow. All right, thanks for being here. We love you guys. We'll see you in our next one. Take care.